I checked my bank account one more time before getting out of the car. $12.37, that was it. That was all I had left after rent, after the electric bill, after buying the cheapest ramen I could find at the corner store. The facility loomed in front of me like some kind of concrete monster. 3 stories of gray. Nothing, sitting in the middle of an industrial park that looked like it had been abandoned since the 80s. No other cars in the parking lot except for a beat-up Honda that probably belonged to whoever was supposed to train me tonight. I'd found the position posting on some sketchy website in the morning, right after my landlord had slipped another late notice under my door. Night supervisor position, excellent payment, immediate start. The payment they'd listed was more than I'd make in a month at any normal position. Way more, which should have been my first red flag. But when you're down to your last $12, you don't ask too many questions. The front door was one of those heavy metal things with a buzzer system. I pressed the button and waited, bouncing on my feet to keep warm. October in Detroit was already getting nasty, and this place didn't seem to have much in the way of heating. Yeah. The voice, low and crawling with static, through the intercom sounded stressed. Daniel Harris, I'm here for the supervisor position. A long pause. Then the door buzzed open. The guy waiting for me in the lobby looked like he hadn't slept in about a week. Average height, stocky build, wearing a brown suit that had seen better days. His hair was doing that thing where you try to cover up a bald spot, but it just makes it more obvious. He kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, even though it wasn't that warm inside. Mr. Schmidt. He stuck out his hand. Harlan Cooper. Everyone calls me Harlan. His handshake was sweaty and he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Thanks for coming in on such short notice. No problem. I looked around the lobby. Fluorescent lights, industrial carpet that had probably been beige once upon a time, and a security desk that looked like it hadn't been used in years. So, what exactly does this place do? Storage, warehousing, you know. Harlan was already walking toward a set of double doors. Come on, let me show you around. The facility floor was huge. Rows and rows of metal shelving stretching up toward the ceiling, most of it eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional from what I could see. Our footsteps echoed in the space, bouncing off the concrete walls. The lighting was dim, just enough to see where you were going, but not much else. So, I'd be supervising what exactly? I asked, following Harlan down one of the aisles. Night duty operations, making sure everything runs smooth. He pulled out another handkerchief and wiped his forehead again. It's not complicated work. Mostly just keeping an eye on things. We walked past more eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional shelves. I didn't see any other workers. Didn't hear any machinery running. The place felt dead. How many people work nights? Just a couple. You'll meet Victor in a bit. He's been here forever. Harlan stopped at a metal staircase leading up to what looked like a control room with windows overlooking the facility floor. This will be your station. The control room was small but functional. Desk, chair, filing cabinet, and a bank of surveillance feeds showing different angles of the facility. Most of the screens just showed eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional hallways and storage areas. Now, before we go any further, Harlan reached into his jacket and pulled out a laminated sheet of paper. These are the directives. You need to read them. You need to follow them, every single one. Every single night. I took the sheet and looked it over. 5 directives typed out in bold letters. 1. Do not enter the break room after 11 p.m. 2. Do not watch the security monitors alone. 3. If the lights go out, do not move until they come back on. 4. If a man in black asks for you by name, do not respond. 5. If you hear clicking sounds, lock your door immediately. I read through them twice, waiting for Harlan to crack a smile or tell me it was some kind of joke. He didn't. Seriously, dead serious. He wasn't wiping his forehead anymore. Now he was checking his watch every few seconds. I know it sounds crazy, but you follow those directives and you'll be fine. You don't follow them. He shrugged. Well, let's just say the payment is good for a reason. What kind of storage facility needs directives like this? The kind that payments what we're paymenting? Harlan was already backing toward the door. Look, I got to run. Victor will fill you in on the day-to-day stuff. Just remember what I said about those directives. Wait, that's it? That's my training? But he was already halfway down the stairs, moving faster than I'd seen him move since I got here. A minute later, I heard the front door slam shut. And then it was just me and the eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional facility. I sat down at the desk and looked at the directives again. This had to be some kind of initiation thing, right? New guy gets the weird list. Everyone has a good laugh when he freaks out. Except Harlan hadn't looked like he was setting up a prank. He'd looked scared. I was still staring at the laminated sheet when I heard footsteps on the metal stairs. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed in the quiet space. You must be the new supervisor. The guy standing in my doorway was maybe late 40s, average height, wearing a gray uniform with a name tag that said Victor. His hair was black and perfectly combed. Like he just stepped out of a barber shop, but something about him felt off. Maybe it was how pale he was, or how his eyes didn't seem to blink as much as they should. Daniel Harris. I stood up and held out my hand. His handshake was icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow. Not just cool, but actually icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow. Like he'd been standing in a freezer. Victor Alvarez. I've been here 23 years. 23 years. Wow. You must have seen a lot of changes. 23 years? He repeated like he hadn't heard what I said. I know all the procedures, all the protocols. 23 years of service. Right. So, what exactly do we do here? Harlan wasn't very specific. Victor tilted his head slightly like he was thinking about the question. We maintain inventory. We follow procedures. We ensure compliance with operational standards. Okay, but what kind of inventory? What are we storing? I've been here 23 years, Betty said again. The inventory changes. The procedures remain constant. 23 years of service. I waited for him to say something else, but he just stood there looking at me with those unblinking eyes. So, should you show me around? Explain the routine? The routine is simple. Monitor the facility, maintain security protocols, follow the established procedures. He paused. I've been here 23 years. This was getting weird. Victor, are you feeling okay? 23 years of service. The procedures are clear. The protocols are established. He turned toward the door, then stopped. The break room is off limits after 11 p.m. This is important. Yeah, I saw that on the directives. Why is that? But Victor was already walking away, his footsteps echoing down the metal stairs. I watched him through the control room windows as he walked across the facility floor, moving between the shelves until he disappeared into the shifting, unnatural shadows that writhed like living smoke. I sat back down and looked at the surveillance feeds. Most of them showed eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional. Corridors and storage areas, but a couple showed what looked like a break room and some kind of loading dock. Everything looked normal, boring, even just a regular facility at night, except for the directives and Victor's weird behavior and the way Harlan had practically run out of here. I checked my phone. PM. Still had the whole night ahead of me, and I was already starting to understand why they paid so much for this position. It wasn't the work that was hard. It was the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. A sound echoed from somewhere deep in the facility. Not footsteps this time. Something else. Something that might have been metal scraping against concrete or maybe something dragging across the floor. I looked at the directives. Again. Number 5, if you hear clicking sounds, lock your door immediately. That hadn't been clicking, but it hadn't been normal either. I got up and walked to the control room door. There was a deadbolt on the inside, which seemed like an odd thing to have on a control room door. I tested it. It worked fine, sliding into place with a solid thunk. Another sound from the facility floor. Closer this time. I went back to the monitors and scanned through the different camera angles. Empty hallways, eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional. Storage areas, eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional. Loading dock. But on one of the screens, the one showing the break room, I thought I saw something move past the doorway. Just for a second, just a shadow, but it was there. My phone showed PM, 8 minutes until the break room became off limits. I kept watching the monitors, but everything stayed quiet. Victor was nowhere to be seen. The facility looked completely eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional except for me. At exactly 11 RPM, I heard the first wet dragging sound coming from the direction of the break room. I looked at the directives one more time, then at the deadbolt on my door. This was going to be a very long night. I heard the wet, dragging sound again, coming from somewhere near the break room. It was now 3 minutes past the cutoff time. Rule 1 said don't enter the break room after, but it didn't say anything about checking it out from the hallway. I grabbed one of the flashlights from the desk drawer and headed downstairs. My footsteps echoed way too loud in the eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional facility, but I kept going. The break room was at the far end of the main floor, past rows of mostly eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional shelving. The closer I got, the icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow it became. Not just chilly, actually icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow, like walking into a freezer. My breath started coming out in little puffs. The dragging sound had stopped, but now I could hear something else, a wet, rhythmic noise that might have been breathing. The break room door had a small window in it, the kind with wire mesh embedded in the glass. I crept up to it and peered inside. Darkness. Not just regular darkness where your eyes adjust after a minute. This was thick, heavy darkness that seemed to push back against the glass. I held up my flashlight and clicked it on. But the beam just stopped at the window like it was hitting a wall. That's when the clicking started. Sharp, rapid clicks echoing from somewhere behind me in the hallway. Click, 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 click. Getting closer. Rule 5 flashed through my mind. If you hear clicking sounds, lock your door immediately. I spun around but didn't see anything. The clicking was coming from the direction I just walked, bouncing off the concrete walls and metal shelving. Getting louder. There was a storage closet about 10 feet away. I ran, lungs burning and heart hammering like a trapped animal, for it, yanked the door open, and dove inside just as something big moved past in the hallway. The closet had a lock on the inside. Another weird detail that was starting to make sense. I turned the deadbolt and pressed my back against the door. Heavy breathing right outside. Not human breathing. Too deep, too slow, like something with lungs the size of garbage bags. The door handle rattled once, then stopped. I held my breath and counted to 60, then another 60. The breathing faded away, moving back toward the break room. When I finally crept out of the closet, the hallway was eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional again, but the temperature was still wrong, still too icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow. I ran, lungs burning and heart hammering like a trapped animal, back to my control room, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Victor was waiting for me. He stood by the desk, perfectly still, hands at his sides. His shadow fell across the floor at an angle that didn't match the overhead lights. It stretched too far in the wrong direction, like the light was coming from somewhere else entirely. The inventory requires constant monitoring, he said in that flat voice, low and crawling with static. 23 years of service. The protocols must be maintained. Victor, what the hell is going on down there? Operational standards, compliance. Procedures, 23 years. His head tilted slightly, but his eyes didn't move. They stayed fixed on something just over my shoulder. The break room maintains optimal storage conditions after 11 p.m. Storage conditions for what? 23 years of service. The inventory changes. The procedures remain constant. I was about to ask him another question when every light in the building went out. Complete darkness. Not even the glow from the surveillance feeds. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Rule 3. If the lights go out, do not move until they come back on. I froze where I stood, barely breathing. My heartbeat slammed in my ears, every thud sounding like a countdown, every second stretched into something unbearable. Somewhere in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin, I heard Victor's voice, low and crawling with static, change. The flat monotone became a strangled gasp, like someone was choking. Something moved around me in the control room. Slow, deliberate steps that didn't sound like shoes on concrete, more like something soft and wet dragging across the floor. It circled me. Once, twice. Air brushed against my face as whatever it was passed close enough to touch. Victor's gasping got worse. Desperate, panicked sounds that didn't match his usual robotic calm. Then it cut off completely. The lights flickered back on. Victor stood by the window, but something was wrong with his face. The features were all there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they didn't quite line up right, like someone had tried to put together a puzzle without looking at the picture on the box. His left eye sat a little too high, his mouth curved at an angle that made my stomach turn. 23 years of service, he said, but his voice, low and crawling with static, sounded different now. Hollow. The procedures are clear. The protocols are established. He walked toward the door. But his movements were all wrong, too stiff, like his joints didn't bend the right way. His arms swung at his sides without moving his shoulders. His feet hit the floor at odd intervals, not quite matching a normal walking rhythm. Victor. He stopped at the doorway and turned back. That messed up face looked at me for a long moment. 23 years, he said. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the metal stairs in that same jerky rhythm. I collapsed into the control chair, my legs trembling from the adrenaline, and stared at the laminated directives. This wasn't some elaborate prank. This wasn't initiation or a weird company culture thing. Whatever was happening in this facility was real. And those directives weren't suggestions. They were survival instructions. I checked the time on my phone. p.m. Still had over 7 hours left on my duty. I looked at the surveillance feeds, but half the screens showed nothing but static. Now, the ones that were working showed eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional hallways and storage areas. No sign of Victor, no sign of anything else. But I could hear sounds from somewhere deep in the facility. Dragging noises, clicking. And underneath it all, a wet, breathing sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I pulled out my phone and looked at my bank account again. $12.37, rent was due in 3 days. The electric company had already sent 2 notices. I put the phone away and settled back in the chair, keeping the directives right in front of me where I could see them. Whatever was down there in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin, whatever had happened to Victor's face, whatever was making those sounds, I'd deal with it. I'd follow every single rule exactly as written, because I needed this position. And now I understood why they paid so much for it. The clicking started again somewhere far below in the facility. I didn't move from my chair. I kept my eyes on the directives and waited for morning. I couldn't help myself. I had to know where Victor went. Rule 2 said, don't watch the surveillance feeds alone. But I was already alone, wasn't I? Victor had disappeared somewhere in the facility, and I needed to find him. Maybe he was in trouble. Maybe he needed help. I flipped through the camera feeds, checking each section of the facility. Empty aisles, dark corners. Nothing moving. Then I got to the break room camera. The door was opening. Slowly, like someone was being really careful not to make noise, but nobody came out. The door just kept opening wider and wider until I could see into the room. That's when I saw the eyes. Huge reflective eyes staring straight at the camera. They filled most of the doorway, way too big to belong to anything human. The rest of whatever it was stayed hidden in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin, but those eyes, they knew I was watching. They were looking right at me through the screen. I jerked back from the monitor, but I couldn't look away. The eyes didn't blink. They just kept staring, and I swear they were getting bigger, like whatever they belonged to was moving closer to the camera. I forced myself to check the other monitors. Most showed eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional hallways, but one made my blood freeze. A figure in black was walking down the corridor toward my control room. Tall, wearing what looked like a long coat or maybe a suit. It moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going. When it looked up at the camera, I saw my own face. Not similar to my face, not someone who looked like me. My actual face, down to the scar on my left hand that I could see as it waved at the camera. The thing smiled, my smile, and mouthed something. My name. It was mouthing my name. Rule 4 flashed through my head. If a man in black asks for you by name, do not respond. I dove under the desk just as footsteps started up the metal stairs. Heavy, deliberate steps that echoed in the stairwell. I pulled my knees to my chest and tried to make myself as small as possible, clutching the laminated directives against my chest. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped outside my control room door. Daniel. The voice, low and crawling with static, was mine. Exactly mine, down to the slight German accent. Daniel, I know you're in there. I held my breath. The door handle rattled. Come on, man. Open up. It's me. A pause. Well, it's you technically, but we need to talk. The footsteps moved into the control room. I could hear them walking around the desk, checking behind the filing cabinet. I know this is weird, my voice, low and crawling with static, continued. Trust me, it's weird for me, too. But I'm here to help. The facility, it's not what you think it is. Those directives, they're not protecting you. They're keeping you trapped. The footsteps stopped right next to the desk. I could see black shoes inches from my face. Remember when you were 8 and you broke Mom's favorite vase? You hid under your bed for 3 hours because you thought she'd never forgive you. But she did. Didn't she? She always forgave you. My stomach dropped. Nobody knew about that. I'd never told anyone. Or what about Buster? Your first dog? Remember how you cried for a week when he died? You buried him in the backyard with his favorite tennis ball. The voice, low and crawling with static, was getting angry now, frustrated. I know about the scar on your hand. I know you got it when you fell off your bike trying to impress Sarah Martinez in 4th grade. I know you still think about her sometimes. I know everything because I am you. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed the directives harder against my chest. Don't respond. Don't respond. Don't respond. Fine. The voice, low and crawling with static, turned icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow. You want to play games? You want to hide under there? Like a scared little kid? Go ahead. But you can't stay under that desk forever. And when you come out, I'll be waiting. The footsteps moved toward the door. Then stopped. Oh, and Daniel, your mom's maiden name was Fisher. Your first pet was a goldfish named Bubbles before you got Buster. You had a birthmark on your shoulder that you were embarrassed about until you were 16. You lost your virginity to Rebecca Chen in the back of her Honda when you were 19. And you still feel guilty about how it ended. My hands were shaking. Those weren't just memories. They were private memories. Things I'd never told anyone. Things I barely thought about anymore. I know all of it, the voice, low and crawling with static, said, softer now, almost pleading. Because I lived it, too. We're the same person, Daniel. The only difference is I found a way out. The footsteps moved to the door. Think about it. I'll be back. The door closed. The footsteps went down the stairs and faded away. I stayed under the desk for another 10 minutes, counting my heartbeats and trying to process what had just happened. When I finally crawled out, my legs were cramped and my hands were still shaking. I checked the monitors again. The break room door was closed now. No sign of those massive eyes. The corridors were eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional. Everything looked normal. Then I found Victor. He was standing in one of the facility aisles, perfectly still between two rows of shelving. His back was to the camera and he wasn't moving at all, just standing there like a statue. As I watched, something moved in the shadows behind him. Something big and dark that seemed to flow between the shelves like liquid. It reached out. I couldn't see what it was reaching with, just a darkness that stretched toward Victor's shoulder. Victor didn't run, didn't fight, didn't even turn around. He just stood there as the shadow wrapped around him and pulled him backward into the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin between the shelves. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. I stared at the eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional aisle. Waiting for him to reappear, waiting for some sign of what had taken him. But the shadow stayed still, and Victor didn't come back. I checked every other camera. No Victor, no sign of whatever had grabbed him, just eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional facility and the growing certainty that I was completely alone now. Except I wasn't alone, was I? Something that looked like me was walking around down there. Something that knew my memories, my secrets, my name. And somewhere in the break room, something with eyes the size of dinner plates was waiting. I looked at the directives again. Rule 4 said, "Don't respond if a man in black asks for you by name." It didn't say what would happen if you did respond. It didn't say what the man in black wanted or why he had my face, but I was starting to understand that the directives weren't just about staying safe. They were about staying human, about not becoming whatever Victor had become after 23 years, about not ending up like the thing in the break room or the shadow that had taken Victor without a fight. I settled back in my chair and kept my eyes on the monitors. Whatever was down there, whatever wanted me to come out, whatever was wearing my face, it could wait. I had directives to follow and a position to finish. Even if I was the only human left in the building. I sat in that control room chair for the next 6 hours, every light blazing, staring at anything except those monitors. Every creak of the building made me jump. Every shadow that moved past the window had me gripping the desk until my knuckles went white. Around 8 a.m., I heard footsteps in the facility again. Slow, deliberate ones that could have been Victor or that thing wearing my face. Or something else entirely. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the laminated directives and counted my breathing until the sounds faded away. The clicking came back twice more before dawn. Both times. I locked the control room door and waited it out. The first time lasted maybe 10 minutes. The second time went on for almost an hour, moving back and forth through the facility like whatever was making it couldn't find what it was looking for. I didn't move. Didn't check the monitors. Didn't even go to the bathroom, though I really needed to. The directive said lock your door when you hear clicking. So that's what I did. Bye. I could see the first hints of daylight through the control room window. Real daylight, not the sickly fluorescent glow that filled the facility at night. At a.m. sharp, I heard voice, low and crawling with static S. Downstairs. Normal human voice, low and crawling with static S, talking about coffee and weekend plans. The day duty was here. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the stairs, moving fast but careful. The facility looked different in the morning light streaming through the high windows. Still mostly eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional. Shelves. Still concrete floors and metal framework, but it felt normal now, like a regular building where regular people worked regular positions. I checked every corner anyway. Looked behind every shelf I passed. Kept my back to the walls and my eyes moving. The break room door was closed and I gave it a wide berth as I walked past. The employee entrance was at the far end of the building, past the loading docks. I'd never used it before. Harlan had brought me in through the front lobby yesterday, but I'd seen it marked on the fire safety poster in the control room. I was almost there when I heard my name. Daniel. I spun around, heart hammering, but it was just Harlan. He stood by the loading dock doors, holding a cup of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept much either. His hair was even messier than usual, and his suit looked like he'd slept in it. "You made it," he said, and he sounded genuinely surprised. Not pleased, exactly. More like he'd expected to find my body somewhere in the facility. "Yeah, I made it." He walked over, studying my face, like he was checking for injuries. "How was it?" "The first night's always the hardest." It was. I thought about Victor's face rearranging itself in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin. About the eyes in the break room, about my own voice, low and crawling with static, trying to trick me into opening the door. It was exactly what you said it would be. Harlan nodded slowly. "You followed the directives?" "Every single one." "Good. That's good." He took a sip of his coffee, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Victor, show you around." "Okay." I almost laughed. Yeah. Victor was very educational. He's been here a long time. Knows the procedures better than anyone. Harlan paused. "You planning to come back tonight?" That was the question, wasn't it? I could walk out that door right now and never look back. Find another position. Any position, even if it paid Minimum wage, work 3 positions if I had to. Sleep on friends' couches. Figure something else out. But I thought about my bank account. $12.37. Rent due in 2 days. The electric company's final notice sitting on my kitchen counter. The position applications I'd sent out over the past month with no responses. And I thought about what Harlan had said yesterday. The payment was high for a reason. Now I knew the reason, but I also knew the directives worked. I had survived my first night by following them exactly. Whatever was in that facility, whatever had happened to Victor over 23 years. Whatever was hunting in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin, it could all be managed if you were careful. If you followed the procedures. Yeah, I said, I'll be back. Harlan's shoulders sagged with what might have been relief. Good. That's really good, Daniel. Most people don't make it past the first night, and the ones who do usually don't come back. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. Your payment for last night. I took it, feeling the thickness of the bills inside. I didn't count it right there, but it felt like more wages than I'd held in months. Same time tonight? I asked. Same time, Victor will be here to help with anything you need. Harlan paused. Just remember, the directives exist for a reason. They're not suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're the difference between going home in the morning and not going home at all. I nodded and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard Harlan talking to the day duty workers, his voice, low and crawling with static, returning to something like normal as he discussed inventory reports and shipping schedules. Regular facility business. Outside, the morning air felt amazing, clean and warm and completely normal. I got in my car and sat there for a minute, just breathing. Then I opened the envelope. $800. Cash for one night's work. I stared at the bills, counting them twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. $800. That was more than I'd made in the past 3 weeks combined. More than my rent. More than my electric bill and groceries. And gas wages put together. No wonder Victor had stayed for 23 years. No wonder. He'd let whatever was in that facility slowly change him into something that wasn't quite human anymore. When you're desperate enough, when you're broke enough, you'll put up with a lot. Even things that shouldn't exist. I started the car and drove home, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a promise. Tonight, I'd go back. I'd follow the directives. I'd stay in my control room with the lights on and avoid the break room and lock my door when I heard clicking. And I'd collect another $800. Because whatever was hunting in that facility, whatever had grabbed Victor in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin, whatever was wearing my face and trying to trick me, none of it was scarier than being homeless. None of it was worse than having my electricity shut off or getting evicted or going hungry. I'd survived one night, I could survive another. The directives would keep me safe. And the wages would keep me alive. That was the deal. That was the trap. And I was walking right into it. I drove back to the facility that evening with 3 extra flashlights, 2 backup phone chargers, and a hand-drawn map of every storage room I could remember from the fire safety poster. I'd spent the day memorizing exit routes and safe spots. convinced that preparation was the key to surviving whatever lived in that building. The parking lot looked the same, eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional except for that beat-up Honda in my car. But something felt different the moment I stepped out. Colder, even though it was still September, the air had this weight to it, like right before a thunderstorm. I checked my phone. PM, 13 minutes. Until the break room became off limits. The front door buzzed me in without any questions from Harlan. The lobby was eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional, fluorescent lights humming their usual tune. I headed straight for the facility floor, my footsteps echoing louder than they had yesterday. That's when I noticed the shifting, unnatural shadows that writhed like living smoke. They weren't just dark spots where the light didn't reach. They moved. Subtle at first. Just a duty here, a ripple there. But as I walked toward my control room, I caught them sliding along the walls, following me. The clicking started before I even reached the stairs. Sharp, rapid sounds bouncing off the concrete and metal shelving. But this time, they weren't coming from one direction. They were everywhere. Behind me, above me, echoing from the far corners of the facility like a dozen somethings were moving through the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin. I ran, lungs burning and heart hammering like a trapped animal, for the nearest storage room, fumbling with my map. Room C7, about 50 feet to my left. I sprinted between the shelves, the clicking getting louder and faster, like whatever was making it was excited. The storage room door was unlocked. I dove inside and slammed the deadbolt home just as something heavy hit the other side. The door shook in its frame, but held. I waited, counting my breathing like I'd done the night before. The clicking moved past the door, circled back, then faded toward the break room area. When I finally crept out, the facility felt different again, darker, even with all the overhead lights on. The shadows seemed thicker, more solid, and they were definitely watching me. I made it to my control room and locked the door behind me. The surveillance feeds were already on, showing their usual views of eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional corridors and storage areas. Except they weren't eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional. Every single monitor showed me, not someone who looked like me. Me standing in different parts of the facility, wearing the same clothes I had on right now. But each version was slightly wrong. One had his head tilted too far to the left. Another's arms hung at an unnatural angle. A third was smiling, but the smile was too wide and showed too many teeth. I checked the monitor that showed my control room. It displayed an eerily empty, abandoned in a way that felt intentional room, but I was sitting right there. I waved at the camera. The monitor didn't show anything. According to the security system, my control room was completely vacant. I flipped through the other feeds. The versions of me were moving now, walking through the facility with that same jerky mechanical gait I'd seen from Victor. They weren't looking for anything specific. They were just patrolling like guards. One of them stopped directly in front of a camera and stared straight at me through the screen. Its mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but I could read its lips. Come down and play. I jerked back from the monitors and focused on the laminated directives. Don't watch the surveillance feeds alone. But I was alone, wasn't I? Victor was gone. Harlan had left. There was nobody else in the building except whatever was wearing my face. The lights went out. Complete darkness. Just like before. But this time it felt different. The darkness had weight, pressing against me from all sides like I was underwater. I could feel it moving around me, circling, testing. I froze. Remembering Rule 3. Don't move until the lights come back on. That's when the voice, low and crawling with static, started. My voice, low and crawling with static. Multiple versions of it coming from different directions around the control room. Rule 1, said a voice, low and crawling with static, to my left. Don't enter the break room after 11 p.m. Rule 2, said another voice, low and crawling with static, behind me. Don't watch the security monitors alone. Rule 3, said a third voice, low and crawling with static, right next to my ear. Don't move when the lights go out. But then the directives started changing. Rule 4, said a voice, low and crawling with static, from the corner. Don't trust anyone who claims to help you. Rule 5, said another. Don't believe you can leave. Rule 6, said a voice, low and crawling with static, that sounded like it was coming from inside my own head. Don't think you have a choice. More voice, low and crawling with static, joined in. All mine. All reciting directives that weren't on the laminated sheet. Directives about staying forever. Directives about accepting your fate. Directives about becoming part of the facility. Rule 23, said a voice, low and crawling with static, that was getting closer. Don't resist the transition. Something grabbed my shoulder. Cold fingers just like Victor's handshake, but the grip was stronger, more certain. 23 years, Victor's voice, low and crawling with static, whispered in my ear. That's how long it takes. 23 years of following the directives, keeping the things locked up, making sure they don't get out. But now my time's up. I wanted to turn around. Wanted to see what Victor had become. But Rule 3 kept me frozen. Don't move when the lights go out. You understand now, don't you? Victor's voice, low and crawling with static, was different. Not flat and emotionless like before. Tired. Relieved. The directives aren't protection. They're training. They're teaching you how to be a keeper. How to guard the things that live here. His grip tightened on my shoulder. I've been waiting so long for a replacement. Someone who'd follow the directives exactly. Someone who'd learned the procedures. Someone who'd understand that the facility needs a guardian. I tried to speak, tried to ask what he meant, but my voice, low and crawling with static, wouldn't work. The things in the break room, the shifting, unnatural shadows that writhed like living smoke. Between the shelves, the clicking in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin. They're not trying to hurt you. They're testing you, making sure you're worthy. Making sure you can keep them contained. The voice, low and crawling with static, around me were getting louder, more insistent. All my voice, low and crawling with static, all reciting directives that made my skin crawl. Rule 47, don't remember who you used to be. Rule 62, don't count the years. Rule 99, don't hope for escape. But I followed the directives. I managed to whisper. Exactly, Victor said, and I Could hear the smile in his voice, low and crawling with static. You followed them perfectly. That's how I knew you were ready. The lights flickered back on. I spun around to face Victor, and what I saw made my stomach drop. His face was completely wrong now. Not just rearranged like before, but transformed. His skin had a gray, waxy texture like old putty. His eyes were too large and reflected light like an animal's. His mouth stretched too wide, showing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. But worst of all, he looked relieved. Happy even. 23 years, he said again, his voice, low and crawling with static, echoing strangely from that impossible mouth. And now I can finally rest. His grip on my shoulder was like a vice. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger than any human should be. The facility chose you. The moment you walked in, he continued. It could smell your desperation, your willingness to do anything for wages. That's what it needs. Someone who will stay no matter what they see, no matter what they become. I looked at the monitors. The versions of me were still there, still patrolling. But now I understood what they were. They weren't copies or illusions. They were previews. Let me go, I said, pulling harder against his grip. I can't do that. Victor's transformed face showed something that might have been pity. The facility needs a keeper. Someone to make sure the things stay locked up. Someone to enforce the directives. Someone to find the next replacement when they're 23. Years are up. I don't want this position anymore. Neither did I. But want doesn't matter here. Need does. And the facility needs you. I could feel something changing in my shoulder where he gripped it. Icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow, spreading through my arm, numbing my fingers. The same. Icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow I'd felt in his handshake. Don't fight it, Victor said gently. It's easier if you don't fight it. Just follow the directives. Do your position. Keep the things contained. In 23 years, you'll find your own replacement. The icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow, was spreading faster now, creeping up my neck and down my chest. I could feel my thoughts getting fuzzy, distant, like I was falling asleep. The directives will make sense soon, Victor continued. All of them, even the ones that aren't written down. You'll understand why the break room has to stay locked. Why the shifting, unnatural shadows that writhed like living smoke need to be watched. Why the clicking can't be allowed to spread. I tried to remember why I'd come here. Money, right? I needed wages. But that seemed less important now. The facility needed me. The things inside needed a keeper. That's it, Victor said, his grip loosening slightly. Just accept it. Accept your purpose. But something in me rebelled. Maybe it was the part that remembered being human. Maybe it was pure stubbornness. Maybe it was the realization that Victor's relief meant he was about to become something even worse than what he already was. I grabbed one of my backup flashlights and swung it as hard as I could at Victor's transformed face. The impact sent him staggering backward, his grip finally breaking. The icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow in my shoulder, receded and my thoughts cleared like fog lifting. You can't leave, Victor shouted, his voice, low and crawling with static, distorting into something inhuman. The facility won't let you. You've seen too much. You know too much. I was already running for the door. Behind me, I heard Victor's footsteps, but they didn't sound like footsteps anymore. They sounded wet and heavy, like something dragging itself across the floor. The clicking started up again, coming from every direction. The shadows on the walls were moving faster now, reaching for me as I ran, lungs burning and heart hammering like a trapped animal, down the stairs. I didn't look back. I didn't check the monitors. I didn't follow any directives except the most important one. Get out. Get out now. Get out before the facility made me into another Victor, another keeper, another thing that counted years instead of days. The employee entrance was at the far end of the building. I ran, lungs burning and heart hammering like a trapped animal, through the facility, past the break room with its terrible secrets, past the storage areas where things clicked and whispered, past the shelves that held nothing but shadows. Behind me, Victor was calling my name, not shouting it, calling it softly. Sadly, like he was disappointed in me. Daniel, his voice, low and crawling with static, echoed through the facility. You can't run from what you are. You can't escape your purpose. The facility has chosen you. But I kept running because I finally understood the real trap. It wasn't the wages. It wasn't the directives. It wasn't even the things that lived in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin. The trap was thinking you could control it. Thinking you could follow the procedures and stay safe and collect your payment and remain human. The facility didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to keep me forever. I burst through the employee entrance like I was breaking the surface of deep water, gasping for air that didn't taste like metal in a suffocating fear that pressed against my ribs like iron bands. The morning sun hit my face. Real warmth after hours of fluorescent icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow, and I stumbled toward my car with Victor's voice, low and crawling with static, still echoing behind me. Daniel. Not shouting anymore, just calling my name like he was disappointed I hadn't stayed for the rest of the lesson. My hands shook so bad I dropped my keys twice before getting the car door open. I threw myself into the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition, not caring that the engine turned over. Way too loud in the quiet parking lot. That's when I saw him in my rear view mirror. Victor stood in the doorway of the facility, not chasing me, not even moving, just watching. His transformed face was too far away to make out clearly, but I could feel his eyes on me. There was something in his posture. Relief maybe, or pity, like he was sorry I'd chosen the hard way. I threw the car in reverse and peeled out of there, tires squealing on the asphalt. In my mirror, Victor got smaller and smaller. Until he was just a gray figure in a gray doorway. But he never moved, never stopped watching. I was 3 blocks away when I remembered the laminated directives in my jacket pocket. I pulled them out at the next red light, staring at those 5 simple sentences that had almost cost me everything. Do not enter the break room after 11 p.m. Do not watch the surveillance feeds alone. If the lights go out, do not move until they come back on. The light turned green. I rolled down my window and threw the directives out into traffic. They fluttered in the wind for a second, white against the gray morning sky before a delivery truck ran them over. I watched them disappear under the wheels. And felt something loosen in my chest. My phone started buzzing. Harlan's name. On the screen. I let it go to voice, low and crawling with static, mail. It buzzed again immediately. Another call, then a text, then another call. I pulled over and checked the messages. Daniel, where are you? Victor says, you left early. Call me back. Look, I know. The first few nights are rough, but you can't just abandon your post. We need to talk. The payment is good, Daniel. Really? Good. Don't throw this away over some jitters. I can get you more training, better preparation. Victor says you've got potential. Call me back. We can work this out. I deleted them all without reading the rest. Then I blocked Harlan's number. The drive home took forever. Every shadow looked wrong. Every reflection in store windows made me check twice to make sure it was really me. But the farther I got from that facility, the more normal everything became. Traffic lights worked the way they were supposed to. People walked down sidewalks like regular humans. The sun kept rising like it always did. By the time I got to my apartment, I almost felt human again. Almost. I sat in my car for a minute looking up at my building. Same cracked concrete steps. Same peeling paint on the front door. Same pile of bills waiting on my kitchen counter. Nothing had changed. But everything felt different. I'd walked away from $800 a night from enough wages to payment my rent, my electric bill, my groceries, everything. I'd chosen being broke over becoming whatever Victor had turned into. After 23 years of following the directives, it was the right choice. I knew it was the right choice. But damn, it hurt. I climbed the stairs to my apartment. Each step reminding me how tired I was. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. My shoulders still ached where Victor had grabbed me. And I could swear I felt a lingering icy cold, the kind of chill that gnaws into bone and lingers in the marrow in that spot. Inside, I went straight to my laptop and opened every position search site I could think of. Indeed, Monster, Craigslist, even the sketchy ones where I'd found the facility posting in the first place. I applied for everything. Retail positions that paid minimum wage, restaurant work that would leave me smelling like grease. Control room temp positions that barely covered bus fare. Data entry gigs that would make my eyes bleed from staring at spreadsheets. Normal positions. Human positions. Positions where the worst thing that could happen was getting yelled at by a customer or having to work overtime. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but it might have been about one of the applications I just sent. Hello, Daniel. Harlan's voice, low and crawling with static, but calling from a different phone. We need to talk. I hung up and blocked that number, too. It rang again 5 minutes later. Another unknown number. The facility needs you, Daniel. You can't just walk away from this. I hung up and turned my phone off completely. But I kept applying for positions. Anything that would hire me. Anything that paid in normal wages for normal work. Work where you didn't have to memorize directives about break rooms and clicking sounds. Work where your coworkers stayed human for their entire employment. By noon, I had sent out 47 applications. By evening, I had 3 callbacks. By the end of the week, I had 2 interviews lined up. The first was at a grocery store. Stocking shelves, cleaning floors, helping customers find the cereal aisle. $850 an hour, which was barely enough to survive on, but it was honest wages. Clean wages. Money that didn't come with a price you couldn't calculate in dollars. The second was at a call center taking complaints about cable bills and internet outages. $9 an hour plus commission if I could talk people into upgrading their service. Soul-crushing work, but the kind that left your soul intact. I took both positions, 60 hours a week between them, just enough to cover rent and ramen and keep the lights on. I'd be tired all the time. I'd have no social life. I'd probably have to find a third position eventually, but I'd be human. I'd sleep in my own bed every night instead of counting down 23 years in a gray uniform. I'd deal with angry customers instead of things that clicked in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin. I'd watch normal security cameras that showed what was actually there. My phone stayed off for 3 days. When I finally turned it back on, I had 17 missed calls from different numbers and a dozen text messages, all from Harlan. All saying the same thing in different ways. Come back. The wages is good. The directives keep you safe. Victor says you're perfect for the position. Don't throw this opportunity away. The last message was different. We found someone else. Kid named Marcus. Just as desperate as you were. He starts tonight. Hope you can live with yourself. I stared at that message for a long time. Some kid named Marcus was walking into that facility right now, probably clutching those same laminated directives, probably thinking he could handle whatever came next as long as the wages was good enough. I thought about calling him, warning him, telling him to run before it was too late, but I didn't have his number. Didn't even know his last name. And even if I did, would he listen? Would I have listened if someone had tried to warn me? Probably not. When you're desperate enough, when you're broke enough, you'll convince yourself that any position is better than no position. That any wages is better than no wages. Even wages that comes with directives about things that shouldn't exist. I deleted Harlan's messages and went to work. The grocery store was exactly what I'd expected. Fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. Customers who treated you like furniture. Managers who acted like stocking soup cans was rocket science. But the lights stayed on when they were supposed to. The customers were human, even the rude ones. And nobody handed me a list of directives about avoiding break rooms or locking doors when you heard clicking. The call center was worse. Tiny cubicles, angry voice, low and crawling with static S in my headset, quotas that seemed designed to make you fail. But my coworkers complained about normal things like traffic and bad coffee. Nobody counted years instead of days. Nobody's face rearranged itself in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin. I worked both positions for 2 months, 60 hours a week, barely scraping by, living on generic mac and cheese and whatever was on sale. It sucked. It was exhausting. It was barely enough to survive. But I was surviving as myself. As a human being who got tired and hungry and frustrated with normal human problems. Sometimes I'd drive past the facility on my way to work. The parking lot always had a few cars in it. Now, the same beat-up Honda plus a newer sedan that probably belonged to Marcus. I wondered how he was doing, whether he was following the directives, whether he'd figured out yet that the directives weren't protection. I never stopped to check. One night driving home from my call center duty, I saw ambulances outside the facility, red and blue lights flashing in the suffocating darkness, a blackness so thick it seemed to crawl across the skin, paramedics wheeling someone out on a stretcher, a white sheet pulled up over their face. I slowed down just for a second, long enough to see Harlan standing by the loading dock talking to a police control roomer. Long enough to see him shake his head and point toward the facility entrance. Then I drove home and didn't look back. The next week, there was a new position posting on the same sketchy website where I'd found the facility listing. Night supervisor position. Excellent payment. Immediate start. Looking for someone reliable who could follow simple procedures. I closed the laptop and went to bed. The facility would find another desperate person. Someone else who needed wages bad enough to ignore the red flags. Someone else who'd follow the directives until the directives became part of them. But it wouldn't be me. I'd chosen poverty over becoming another victor. Another 23-year guard of things that shouldn't exist. I'd chosen normal human misery over whatever that place offered. It was the right choice. Even when my stomach growled because I'd skipped lunch to save wages. Even when my landlord called about late rent. Even when I lay awake at night wondering if I'd made a huge mistake, it was still the right choice. Because some prices are too high to payment, no matter how desperate you are. Some positions cost more than wages. Some directives are really chains, and some facilities are really prisons, looking for guards who will lock themselves inside and throw away the key. I'd almost been one of those guards, but I'd run instead. And I was still running. One minimum wage duty at a time, one normal human day at a time, one choice at a time to stay on this side of whatever line separated people like me from people like Victor. It wasn't much of a life, but it was mine.
If you love chilling horror stories and eerie mysteries, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and join us every week for a new descent into darkness. Your next nightmare is just one click away.